Have you ever wondered why some brands just create a magnetic pull, forming a almost cult-like following? And obviously Apple, I would say, falls into that, and others, they just fade into the background. Well, today I'm joined by Lloyed Lobo, the author of From Grassroots to Greatness, a book that delves in deep into the heart of community-led growth. And Lloyd's journey is nothing short of extraordinary, from his childhood in Mumbai to becoming a refugee of the Gulf War and eventually bootstrapping a tech company to phenomenal success. And his experience underscores the undeniable power of community in overcoming adversity and achieving greatness. But how exactly can anyone harness this power to transform a brand from ordinary to iconic? Well, Lloyd is here to unravel the secrets behind building a community that not only supports but elevates a brand or a tech company to new heights. So let's explore these insights and discover the path from grassroots initiatives to global phenomena. But before we get today's guest on, I need to pay the bills. We've got a huge podcast hosting fee to pay for when we're releasing 30 episodes a month. And this month I've partnered with a company called Kiteworks. Now, legacy MFT tools are dated and lack the security that today's remote workforce demands. So companies that continue relying on outdated technology, though, they put their sensitive data at risk. And in a world where digital threats evolve daily, the need for a secure, modern solution has never been more pressing. Well, enter Kiteworks, the beacon of security and efficiency in managed file transfer. And Kiteworks isn't just any MFT solution. With its FedRAMP moderate authorization awarded by the Department of Defense since 2017, Kiteworks sets a new standard for security. And this certification is not just a badge, it's a promise of unparalleled protection for your data, offering a fast track to CMMC compliance and eliminating some of those cumbersome, costly DIY authorization processes that plague so many of the alternatives out there. So please, step into the future of managed file transfer with Kiteworks. You can find out more information at kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com to get you started today. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Dubai, where Lloyd is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Lloyd. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Definitely. I would say I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I think my family, friends, nobody ever expected me to become an entrepreneur. In fact, they expected me to be a bum on the street. But luck would have it, I end up being an entrepreneur. And I co-founded a company called Boast AI. Globally, hundreds of billions of dollars are given in funding to businesses that develop new technology or improve existing technology, but the process is cumbersome, prone to frustrating audits from the government, and receiving the money takes a long time. So Boast AI automates that process so companies can get access to non-dilutive capital, interest-free capital from the government to accelerate their R&D. And we built a sizable business doing this. We bootstrapped the company to 10 million ARR with no marketing team, no investor funding, and now the company has grown more than double of that. In 2020, we sold half the company to a growth equity firm. And then me and my co-founder transitioned from operating the business day to day and became very active board members. Nonetheless, I think, because we bootstrap, and this is another topic to talk about, after the growth equity fund, me and my co-founder are the largest shareholders in the company. And so now we're helping as very active board members. And then after I left the day-to-day of the company, I was bored, of course, because for the last 10 years or 12 years, actually more than that, because ever since I graduated university, I only ever worked at startups. So used to working long hours. And so when I left, I'm like, you know what do I do? And I ended up writing a book, From Grassroots to Greatness, 13 Rules to Build Iconic Brands of Community-Led Growth, became a Wall Street Journal bestseller on the week of the launch. So I did that. And now I've just been on a sabbatical, man, for the last little while. I would say over 10 years, I spent all my time with the business. And my family, my health took a backseat. And so now I'm just paying back the debt, the family debt, the health debt, and focused on that while I sit on 3 boards now and advise a few companies and mostly but spending time doing what's fun, right? You work so hard to eventually take some chips off, not to go back and slog again, but actually to enjoy it for a few until you find the next passion.
Love that. And there's just so much to unpack there. Before we started recording today, you were telling me about your journey that took you from San Francisco to Dubai, where you're talking to me from today. Well, also, you mentioned the phrase, you're an accidental entrepreneur. And your book, From Grassroots to Greatness, it feels like there's just so much going on there. So can you tell me the story behind the book, the core philosophy behind that book, especially that concept of authentic human connections as the foundation for enduring brands? Because I feel that there's a story in itself there, possibly shaped by your journey. Is it fair to say that?
Yeah, definitely. It shaped my journey and my experiences, but then accentuated by some of the most iconic, enduring brands. So, you know, what's funny is all my life, I had no money. I was poor. For the last, 15 years or so, I was relying on my wife paying the bills for the most until, of course, both end up doing well. We sold half the company. But nonetheless, all my life, I didn't have money. I grew up in a very middle-class family. My mom didn't work. My dad was an executive chef. My parents weren't educated. They actually grew up in India. My mom grew up in the slums of Mumbai. And because they weren't educated, they couldn't get jobs overseas, like in the West. So their only option was to go to the Middle East, where the currency translates significantly higher. And my dad actually taught himself, self-taught chef, moved to Kuwait, started lowest rung as a dishwasher, eventually became a very celebrated chaîne de rôtisserie chef when he retired. But nonetheless, growing up, I was born in Kuwait. We couldn't go to fancy vacations. So every summer we had the time off, and my dad's work gave him return tickets to his home country, right? And so we would go to India. And my childhood summers were actually spent in the slums of Mumbai, where it's funny because, that was my first experience I'd say with community, where going to bathroom was a communal activity because there's no bathroom in the house. Pumping water was a communal activity. Every morning you had to pump water because there was no water in the house. Every maybe 15 of those slum houses had a TV, and my mom was overseas, so she could bring a TV. So watching TV was a communal activity where people are hanging over when you're watching TV. Eating, whatever little you had, you'd share with your neighbors, etc. Even it would rain a lot in the summer, monsoons and that, and puddles would turn into ponds and would be swimming in there like a pool. And those were my fondest memories, man. Like every time we had to leave and go back to Kuwait, I would grab my parents by their feet and cry and be like, listen, leave me here. I don't want to come. And then fast forward a few years, we got throttled by the Gulf War, where the security had lapsed and you weren't sure you're going to live or die. And I probably experienced one of the greatest marvels ever. Every building became a sub-community. That day, when I went down the building, people were looking at each other and saying, hey, you know what? I'll organize food supplies. I have extra room if you have displaced family members. I'll guard the building from X time to Y time. Like in 2024, 2023, we just belabor on problems and negativity. But back then we were just like, okay, there's a problem. Security has lapsed. We don't know what's going to happen, how we're going to get evacuated to safety. But let's just solve the problem at hand. We need safety to guard the buildings. We need food, and we need shelter for displaced family members. And so every building became a sub-community that communicated with the next building and the next building, and became this massive grassroots movement that communicated with embassies, that communicated with governments, that eventually evacuated us to safety. And, we were going on this highway of death on this rickety bus, and you can Google search highway of death, where buses are bombed and everything. Now, it was really funny. The adults now, right? They don't know where they're going to land, when they're going to land, if they're going to even survive. The currencies are invalid. They don't know how they're going to care for their family. They should have been crying. But as a 9-year-old, I looked around the bus. The one thing was constant. These adults were singing and cheering each other on and playing the guitars. It was insane. As I reflected back, I realized, a lot of the times in life, we say it's the destination. Or we say, no, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I say it's neither. It's neither the destination nor the journey. It's the companions that matter the most. Who you surround yourself with can make you feel like a rock star and put you in an elevated mood. Or, sometimes you're surrounded by these energy vampires and it just destroys your mental health and your physical health as a function of it. And you just want to leave when you're in a conversation with them. So it's neither the destination nor the journey, but your companions that matter the most. And then fast forward a few years, we immigrated to Canada. I finished engineering, got into the startup world, and the startup world became my community. And then fast forward a few more years, started Boast AI with my best friend from university, had the idea for this product. And we didn't have money. And so we were forced to build a community to grow the company. And so the community was my family. And we built this community-led business. I was running the community. And when we sold off the company and I left the day-to-day, finally I came into money. But I should have been happy, right? Like I came into money for the first time. When I left, though, the day-to-day, actually the opposite happened. I ended up getting depressed. I felt like I lost my tribe. The people I was spending day in, day out with, I gave everything to the community, the company. And then as I started to reflect in my times of depression, I realized that, man, all my life I had no money, but I was happy. And the first time I have money and I'm actually unhappy, I lost my tribe. Then I started to research and I found this concept of blue zones, which are the 5 places around the world where people live functionally until 100. And functionality is important, not just longevity for the sake of it, right? If you're not functional and you live 100, you're miserable. But nonetheless, these people live functionally until the age of 100. And these communities, these blue zones, have 9 traits, and 4 or 5 of them have to do with human-to-human connection. Then I started to peel the onion a little more, and I started looking at and researching companies, and I found something very interesting. Every obscure idea that eventually became an enduring global phenomenon, from Christ to CrossFit, had the exact same 4 stages. People listen to you or buy your product. You have an audience. When that audience comes together to interact with one another on a cadence, where you're a facilitator, not a driver, it becomes a community. Now, here's the kicker. When the community comes together to create impact towards a purpose that's far greater than your profit or your product, it becomes a movement. And eventually, when that movement has undying faith in its purpose through sustained rituals, over time, it becomes a cult or a religion. Audience, community, movement, religion. And the most sustainable brands over time have this theme. And that was very fascinating. And I said, you know what? It would be a disservice if I come into so much free time that I sit on the bed and switch TV or just do nothing with my time. I got to write this book. And so that's why I wrote the book talking about my journey, how we bootstrap Boast, the power of community, but nonetheless, how companies like Harley Davidson and Apple and Nike and HubSpot and Gainsight and Atlassian and all these iconic brands went from grassroots to greatness on the power of people. And the one thing I want to add here is in the last couple of years, we're so fixated over technology and AI. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it, yesterday's innovation will always become tomorrow's commodity. Yeah. We don't say .com company anymore, right? Like we used to in the 2000s. Mm-hmm. We don't say Web 2.0 company anymore. We don't say mobile company or social company anymore. And eventually we will not say AI company anymore either, because yesterday's innovation always becomes tomorrow's commodity. It becomes table stakes in a business, and that's the way you operate. We don't say cloud company anymore. I mean, do you recall we used to say cloud company,
Yes.
web-based company, cloud company? We don't say that anymore. And so every company will have intelligence baked in to survive and thrive. If you're going to fight the AI boom, you're going to be left behind. You either have the option to fight it and die, or embrace it and thrive. And so we will stop saying AI company. But what sustains over time is human-to-human connection. Technology comes, goes, and it's succeeded by better tech, more advances, but human-to-human connection always stays. I'll give you one very good recent example. You know, OpenAI, the most valuable AI company on the planet, one of the most valuable companies, period. OpenAI wouldn't exist without the power of people. People were giving it data and feedback for years when they were building this in stealth. And when the board tried to fire the CEO, Sam Altman, the community revolted and brought him back. Yeah. That is the power of human-to-human connection. We always think the answer is technology, but look at it. People buy from people. Go online and look at any social. Human-to-human engagement is far greater than brand-to-human engagement. People engage with people. People connect with people. People buy from people. That is a message I wanted to share, is that technology will come and go. Yesterday's innovation will always become tomorrow's commodity. But if you build a community, you will never become a commodity.
100% with you. And that's one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast. I say on every episode, technology works best when it brings people together. And just listening to your powerful story there, from the summers in Mumbai to becoming a refugee in the Gulf War to experiencing huge success and financial well-being, being comfortable in that, and how those experiences shaped your understanding and the power of community. But it also reminds me of a quote. I think it was Jim Carrey said once that I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of, just so they can see that that's not the answer. It is about people and community, isn't it?
Exactly.
Now, you also mentioned there a few moments ago the 4-step path behind every global phenomenon that originated from seemingly obscure ideas. Can you just walk me through that process, perhaps maybe provide a few examples just to bring it to life as well?
Definitely, right? So like a lot of, what happens is you have an idea, right? Look at any religion, whether it's Christianity, or look at any product like a Harley Davidson or a CrossFit. You have an idea. You get that idea out of your head. When people engage with that idea, you start developing an audience. When they're repeatedly listening to you, they're using your product, they're using your service, they're engaging with your idea, it's an audience. But nonetheless, it's one way. A great way to explain an audience is all these influencers on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, whatever social have you. They have an audience because people are tuning in to listen to them, right? Back in the day, we tuned in to listen to the TV, and the TV or the show had an audience. Now people have audiences, right? But look at any religion. When the Messiah comes about and people keep showing up to listen to the Messiah, they have an audience. Now, what gets really interesting is when that audience keeps coming together, and not only comes together to listen to the person, to the Messiah or the influencer, they also start interacting with one another around the idea, around the purpose. They start engaging with or without the Messiah in the room or the influencer in the room. Then it starts to become a community, right? You're doing things together, you're interacting with one another, you're socializing, and you keep doing it. A perfect example is look at Harley Davidson, right? Initially, one thing is so interesting, right? We always look at innovation as the last 20 years, right? The internet and, Google and whatnot. But what was the innovation in the 80s? It was electronics, right? And in the 80s, when the Japanese commoditized electronics and started launching these these motorbikes, these super bikes, Harley Davidson almost went bankrupt. They had an audience though, because people were buying their bikes and loving it. They had a fan base. Now the leadership of Harley came out and said, you know what? We're going to make community the ethos of the company. It's not a marketing strategy. It's a company strategy. It had direct oversight from the president of the company, and employees went out there and deliberately started riding clubs. And now from having an audience of Harley fans who were watching Harley content or coming together to fix bikes or just engaging with their brand, they started coming together to interact with one another around the joys and the camaraderie of riding. And this weekend warrior club started popping up everywhere, driven by the Harley employees, and they would start riding every weekend together, right? I mean, do you see that in the UK at all?
Yes, see it all the time. You see it everywhere now. I think it's a great opportunity and thirst for change going on, and I find it quite inspiring.
Exactly. Now, it was a deliberate effort because nothing like that happens if it's not supported by the company. Right? So people started coming together. They started popping up riding clubs. Employees became riders. Riders became employees. And that's how it became a community. But then over time, what started to happen was these riding clubs started donating to causes. They started coming together to donate to breast cancer, to raise awareness for autism, and all these causes. And it turned into a movement. And then eventually today, if you look at it, this company went from seemingly going bankrupt in the 80s to now becoming an iconic brand, where even if you see a dog wearing a leather jacket, you're like, oh, that's a Harley dog. Or people tattoo the brand. How powerful is that on their body? Harley Davidson. Not many people tattoo a company's logo, right? And what's happened is it's become a cult-like brand because of this ritual of coming together every weekend around a specific cause. They have this ritual. Like CrossFit has this ritual, which is people come together around a place which they call the box, right? And they do this workout of the day every single day, and it's become a cult-like brand over time. Look at any religion. You start by listening to the Messiah, then people start coming together in a place, and they interact with one another in this communal place. And then over time, through rituals, people are connected, and it becomes a religion or a cult, right? And so those are three distinct examples. One's a religion, and one's a fitness brand, and one's a motorbike company.
You did mention there the unique power of rituals in creating a almost cult-like following for a community. Can you elaborate on how rituals can effectively be integrated into the community building strategies that we're talking about here? I'd love to hear more about how you bring that to life using those rituals.
Definitely. I mean, rituals play a very powerful role in fostering a sense of belonging and identity within a community, right? So when you integrate it, it creates a shared experience. It reinforces group cohesion and commitment. A ritual is nothing but an activity that people do together every time they come together in the specific place. And now you're associating the activity with the purpose and the place, right? So it's like the consistency of it all creates this participation. Like it's a combination of consistency, participation, and symbolism, right? So you're like associated now this activity that you do on a regular cadence with the purpose. And so it's symbolism, it's consistency, it's participation. And it's a combination of those things that lead to creating a cult-like brand. Like, for example, if you look at Apple, right, with their product launches, the annual unveiling is consistent in timing and format. It creates this anticipation and a shared experience among the Apple enthusiasts. Like just the act of unboxing a new Apple product becomes a ritual, reinforcing a sense of belonging to a community that values innovation, right? And I think that is a key element here. If you look at like Peloton, for example, the bike, the virtual high fives and the leaderboards in Peloton's fitness classes, they create a sense of community amongst users. The ritual of joining live classes and interacting with fellow participants fosters a shared experience and commitment to personal fitness goals. I think a bigger example of this is CrossFit, where they have this place which they call the box, the gym they call the box, and every day they have a specific workout of the day, and some workout of the days are commemorated over legends in the CrossFit community. And nonetheless, people come together to perform that ritual together, and that strengthens the bond. There's another element here in creating rituals. You know, right now we're sound, right? We're talking on the phone. Anytime you incorporate more than two senses, you start to build stronger connections and bonds. I know the whole world loves virtual, but think about it now, Neil. If we were sitting and doing this in person at a studio over maybe coffee or your favorite beverage, we would probably stick around longer. We'd probably get to know each other and our families more personally. Now imagine doing that ritual on a cadence every week. We become like an extension of each other's families, right?
Yeah.
And you got to ask yourself, what are some rituals you do either with your friends on a regular cadence or as a family on a regular cadence that you feel have strengthened your bond significantly?
I should also mention, you managed to bootstrap a tech company to $10 million in revenue, primarily through community building. Any strategies that you use to accomplish this, and how can they apply to other contexts? Again, for anybody listening that are getting those light bulb moments listening to our conversation today.
Definitely. So, when we started the company, you start by saying, I'm going to sell to anyone who's going to pay me. So we said, okay, let's sell to manufacturing and oil and gas and construction. But when we started picking up the phone and calling them, nobody would talk to us. So we started hitting up their events to meet them in person. And we looked like two young guys who threw on a suit jacket on top of a hoodie. And, and they're the old cigars club. We couldn't resonate with them. Or they couldn't resonate with us, and vice versa. And so dejected, we started hitting up the startup events, and it felt like we found our tribe, right? They were starting companies. They needed money. We were having the same set of problems. We started hanging out with them, eating together, partying together, participating in hackathons together. And we really, really understood that market. Now, the key insight here, because when you are in the thick of things, it feels like throwing spaghetti on the wall. When you've achieved some success and look back, it becomes a framework. So step number one is figuring out your ideal customer profile or ideal community profile. Who is it that you want as a part of your audience? It can't be everyone. They got to be around a specific theme, a topic. And so the best way to figure that ICP is, number one, do I have the passion for this audience or topic? If you hate what you're doing, you're not going to sustain. Building a community or any business is a long slog. If you hate your customers or hate the product or hate what you're doing, you're not going to be able to succeed. You'll burn out. So for example, I worked on 2 products or 3 products for the same startup community. We built a conference around this community. And when I left the day-to-day of the business, I even wrote a book for this community because it's a labor of love. I love this audience. So 1, do I have the passion for the topic or the audience? Number 2, is it a small but growing niche? Number 3, do you have the ability to access it? I mean, if you don't have access, you'll just be stuck. And the last one is there a propensity to pay? If they can't pay you, you'll never build a business. And once you have these 4 things and you've nailed down your audience, like who you want to target, you got to figure out, 1, where this audience eats, breathes, drinks, and sleeps. What are their pains and goals, meaning what frustrations they have immediately that is not addressed anywhere else? What stands in the way? And what are their long-term aspirations? Their pains and goals and what stands in the way will give you maybe product 1 or the first few ideas for your community. And their long-term aspirations will give you future content ideas, future product ideas. And then the third thing is figuring out this audience's circle of influence, right? Who do they follow? Who are the influencers that they respect and listen to? Who do they fund? What are the tools and products and services they pay for? And where do they frequent? Are they on TikTok? Are they on Instagram? Are they on LinkedIn? What blogs, magazines they read? Because once you have your ideal customer profile and you have this list of people they fund, frequent, and follow, you can say, hey, you know what? If I'm going to create content, I might collaborate with XYZ person they influence. I might invite this influencer on my podcast. I might partner with other service providers that sell to the same audience. Maybe we host partnered events. Maybe we host partnered podcasts or whatever it is, partnered webinars. Maybe I invite them as a sponsor, or we co-promote something so we get access to each other's audiences. And the last one is, where do they frequent? If they're hanging out at the Rotary Club, then why are you on LinkedIn, right? If they're hanging out on Instagram, why are you on, why are you on LinkedIn, kind of thing. So keep that in mind. Then once that is the case, you have this, you understand everything about your ideal audience profile. Like, sit and write down like 100 burning questions they have. Like, think about, if I had to write the ultimate guide to XYZ aspiration or problem for my ideal customer profile, what would be the chapters, sub-chapters, key topics, tactics, and takeaways? And then start creating content around it with a cadence. One of the key things is it takes time. So keep doing it. And the compound interest on consistency is what will lead to an overnight success. Compound interest is the secret ingredient, or rather consistency is the secret ingredient that turns small actions into big outcomes. So at Boast, what we did was, this was 2012, okay, when we started. TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn wasn't a thing for business content. Like TikTok and Instagram didn't even really, TikTok didn't exist. Instagram wasn't a thing for business content. Podcasting for business also wasn't very huge. The mainstream was just looking at blogs. And we said to ourselves, if we start to create a blog today, it's going to take forever, competing with all the big giants like the Neil Patels and so on. And so we hit up the local newspaper and convinced them to give us a regular weekly column and to build the audience. And we thought that if we get that column, we'll get a backlink from the newspaper to our website. And our website is new, obscure, a high domain authority like the newspaper linking back to our website would be huge. And we'll get the social proof as columnists for the newspaper. And people will build trust and will have credibility, right? Trust is the cornerstone of all relationships. And when you're nobody, you got to associate with people who are more influential than you and be seen with them, so you get their brand rub. Now, it was a hard process convincing the newspaper, but nonetheless, they gave me a guest blog post eventually. And I drove so much traffic to it that the editor called me and said, if you commit to writing it every week, I'll give you a print column. Wow, that was what I was after. It became, we called the blog, we called the column Startup of the Week. So every week we'd cover a new startup, which gave me an opportunity to add value to a startup that is a potential customer of mine. And, in the natural course of asking them or them asking us, hey, what do you do? It would transition to a business conversation, but not pushy at all, right? They knew who we were, and if they needed our service, they would do business with us. But nonetheless, every week we were in the newspapers, and we did three things. One, we got the SEO from the backlink of the biggest or largest domain authority in the country. Two, we got immense social proof. And what was happening was these entrepreneurs would be covered as Startup of the Week, would socialize it and share it everywhere. They'd even go to the newspaper stands at 6, 7 in the morning on Mondays and take the clipping and share it on their socials. 3, we put a form in there saying, if you want to be featured, please apply. So we started building our list of email addresses. And now what we did was we had a free co-working space. We had a co-working space with free meeting space. Anyone who'd apply and people we'd know, would invite them to weekly meetups. Because what we found is that in 2012, in the community we were doing business in, all the content for startups was not tactical. It was very high level CEO platitudes. And man, if you're starting a business, you need to know, how do I get my first 10 customers? How do I get my first investor? How do I hire my first employee? How do I launch? There's only so much inspiration you can listen to, right? You need tactics. And we knew all the conferences were putting big name speakers and sharing inspirational talks, and that's not helping after a while. So we started hosting small meetups in our co-working space. I think the first one, like 7 or 10 people showed up, and we brought in a speaker. Now, again, the speaker we picked was a person of influence from that list of who do they follow, who do they find, who do they frequent. And they shared on a very specific tactical topic of how I got my first 100K in revenue, which was relevant. And the key thing here now was never stop. We wrote that startup of the week for 2-3 years every week. And we did this meetup every week. One day, 200 people showed up to a meetup in the co-working space, and the co-working space said, you can't do this ever again. And that eventually evolved to a 1,000-person conference we do every year called Traction. And that was the start small, add value, don't stop, be consistent, and over time, it grows through compound interest. That was our strategy to bootstrap.
Love it, man. Taking into account your experience and background in the AI industry, did that influence your perspective on the importance of human-to-human connection in branding and community building? And also, if we look a little bit further into the future, how do you see the role of technology in fostering or maybe even hindering community growth, especially as brands of the future are expected to be built on what the community says about them? Are you optimistic, pessimistic? How do you see all this unraveling?
I'm always optimistic, man. Like, glass is always half full. There's always going to be naysayers. And if you think negative, I firmly believe you attract the negative. If the collective of the human race think we're doomed, we will be doomed.
Yeah.
That's the reality, right? And so you got to be positive. Technology will always be an enabler, but ultimately technology exists to serve humans. And as long as you realize, and whatever you do is rooted in first principles, meaning we need to serve humans, we need to build better relationships and need to make it easier, better, faster, technology will always be an enabler, right? And I think the vast majority of the people in the world are well-intentioned versus a small few. So I'm optimistic. I think in the short term, it'll create a lot of chaos. AI will, with anything, right? With any technology we've seen. AI is getting a lot of bad name for creating deep fakes and scams and all of this. But look at every technology that came. Didn't Bitcoin and blockchain create a lot of scams? Didn't the cloud industry or the fintech industry lead to a lot of scams? Didn't the internet lead to a lot of scams? So why are we so fixated on AI leading to a lot of scams and harms? There's harms at every turn of technology, but the vast majority of the people want to do good. And so with technological advances and awareness, there'll be enough rules, regulations, and counter or antidotes to the scams, and it'll be a way of doing business. But ultimately, technology exists to enable people. Until the day we live in a world where robots are doing business with robots, the world will be driven and furthered by only human-to-human connection, and technology will always be an enabler.
I think that's a beautiful moment to end on. But before I let you go, I always like to have a little bit of fun with my guests. So I'm going to ask you now to leave one final gift to everyone listening, and that is either a song that we can add to our Spotify playlist or a book that means something to you, or that you'd recommend that we can add to our Amazon wish list. I don't mind which it is, but all I ask is, what would you recommend to everybody listening? What are you going to leave them with and why?
Yeah, I'll give you both. So my favorite book is also based on human-to-human connection. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
If you get a chance, read it a couple times, maybe every couple months, read it. I think it was one of the first books I read. Immensely valuable in generating influence, building relationships. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's the first principle of human-to-human connection. My favorite book. And my favorite song, honestly, I wake up now. I had a huge transformation from being overweight and depressed to being like now nearly 10% body fat, being in the best shape of my life. And what I do when I wake up is I start by giving thanks for something good that happened in my life the previous day, a thing, a person, an event, an activity. And then after that, I play Eye of the Tiger from the Rocky movie, and I bang out as many push-ups as I can. So that is the song at the top of my playlist every morning.
Absolutely love it. As a fellow Rocky fan, I absolutely can't beat a Rocky montage, and the soundtracks are always killer as well. And such motivational movies, so many great lines from that. And before I let you go, one of the great lines from you there is, I think, yesterday's innovation becomes tomorrow's commodity, and you need to build a community or you won't become a commodity. So many great lines there. And for anyone listening that wants to find out more information about you, about your book, connect with you and your community, and listen to your podcast, of course, as well, which we've not mentioned yet, where would you like to point everyone listening?
Yeah, just go to LloydLobo.com, LLOYED, for the book. On Spotify or Apple, just search Traction by Lloyed Lobo. And I've been taking a LinkedIn sabbatical, so follow me on Instagram. It's more personal. It's the more human side of me, LLOYED, on Instagram. I share like fitness, I share business, I share intentional living, all kinds of things about life in general.
Awesome. Well, I'll get those links added. And in a world increasingly influenced by AI, your book, From Grassroots to Greatness, what I love about it, you just reignite that conversation around the unique power of authentic human connections in moulding enduring brands. So much gold in your answers today, and I love everything that you stand for. So just a big thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you, man. Truly, truly appreciate you. And the one thing you got to remember, you always generate the energy you give out. So you've been a great host, positive energy, very lovable, very kind. And that's the energy you give out. The quickest way to make a conversation go south is to show up in a bad light, because that's the energy you're going to attract, right? So throw positivity out there. Think positive. You'll attract the positive. I'm only like in my life, every time something bad happens is because there's negativity rolling in my mind.
I think it's evident, having listened to Lloyd there, that the essence of enduring brands lies not just in their products, but in the strength of their communities. Lloyd's journey and the principles he outlines in From Grassroots to Greatness also provide a compelling blueprint for building a brand that resonates deeply with its audience. And I think Lloyd's unique approach to community-led growth, transforming customers into passionate evangelists and turning brands into unforgettable experiences, is a powerful reminder of the human element in business success and in the world of tech. But this leads me to ponder, in an age where digital interfaces dominate everything, how do we maintain and nurture these authentic human connections? And yes, this is where I put the microphone in front of you. I invite you to join this conversation. Share your thoughts on how communities continue to shape brands of the future. Maybe give a few good and bad examples. I'd love to hear them. So email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilC.Hughes. We'll keep this conversation going, and I will join you bright and early tomorrow morning. But that's it for today. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.